Chrisean. Here. Come on, get out of here. Come on. Come on.
I don't want to be famous no more, bro. I don't want to be
But I'm just trying to I'm sorry, bro.
Alright, but you get this on camera. I'm sorry, bro. I'm not trying to disrespect you, my most fuck the camera. Yeah, fuck the camera. But you need the camera for something.
Nobody warned Chrisean Rock. Nobody prepped her. Nobody even whispered that this interview was about to go completely off the rails. 1 minute, the internet thought it was just another ex talking, another clout chase, another tell my truth moment. The next minute, it felt like someone kicked open a locked door and let all the secrets fall out at once. And not the cute secrets either. We're talking the kind of chaos that makes reality TV look scripted and makes the Kardashians look like a calm meditation retreat. Because when this interview dropped, it didn't just go left. It took a hard turn into wait. Did he really just say that? Territory. Phones started buzzing. Screenshots started flying. Memes were born faster than the truth could catch up. And somewhere in the middle of that digital explosion was Chrisean Rock, blindsided in real time. Watching her past get twisted, stretched, and dragged into the spotlight like a crime scene nobody asked for. This wasn't just shade. This wasn't just fitness. This was scorched earth storytelling with gasoline-soaked details that nobody saw coming. And the wildest part, the internet didn't even pause to ask if it was true. They just grabbed popcorn and hit replay. Because once this interview took that dark turn, there was no going back to really understand why this interview hit like a wrecking ball wrapped in gasoline. You have to understand how carefully the public thought this chapter of Chrisean Rock's life had already been written. People assumed they knew the story. They thought they'd seen the worst moments already. The arguments, the chaos, the viral clips that refused to die. But what nobody expected was for an ex to step forward, sit comfortably in front of a microphone, and casually flip the entire narrative like it was a script revision nobody approved. The interview didn't open with fireworks. That's what made it dangerous. It started soft, almost polite, like a therapist session that accidentally wandered onto YouTube. The ex spoke calmly, choosing his words with just enough hesitation to seem thoughtful, but not enough to seem unsure. That balance is lethal. It disarms the audience. It makes people lean in instead of pulling back. And by the time viewers realized what was happening, the tone had already shifted. He didn't jump straight into accusations. He laid groundwork. He talked about how hard things were, about love that felt overwhelming, about pressure, about fame changing people. All the classics. The kind of emotional appetizers that convince listeners they're about to hear something raw and honest. But then came the pivot. The subtle shift where reflection turns into indictment. Suddenly, the language changed. Words became sharper. Stories became more specific. And that's when it became clear this wasn't about closure. This was about control of the narrative. Because when someone starts telling their truth with timestamps, emotions, and selective memory, they're not just sharing. They're framing. The ex painted Chrisean as unpredictable, intense, and emotionally exhausting. Not in an outright attack way. No, that would have been too obvious. He did it through implication, through size, through phrases like people don't see what happens behind closed doors. That sentence alone has ended more public relationships than cheating ever could. It invites the audience to imagine the worst without ever needing proof. And here's where things got dark. He didn't just talk about arguments. He talked about moments, private ones. Moments that were never meant to be public. Moments that, once spoken out loud, could never be taken back. That's when viewers stopped watching casually and started reacting emotionally. Because everyone understands instinctively that there are some things you just don't say unless you're trying to hurt someone. As clips of the interview started spreading, the reaction was immediate. Not thoughtful, not patient, immediate. People didn't wait for context. They didn't ask for balance. They grabbed the most shocking lines and ran with them like it was a relay race for outrage. Social media turned into a courtroom where evidence didn't matter, only vibes did. What made it worse was the delivery. The ex didn't sound angry. He didn't sound bitter. He sounded composed. And that calmness made everything feel more believable to people who were already looking for a reason to judge. Because rage can be dismissed, calm accusations feel calculated, intentional, dangerous. Chrisean, meanwhile, was nowhere to be found online. No live video, no story post, no instant rebuttal. For someone known to respond quickly, that silence hit like a red flag to the internet. People began filling in the blanks themselves. Some assumed shock. Others assumed guilt. A few assumed she was simply choosing peace. But the loudest voices didn't care about her reasoning. They cared about content. The interview kept escalating. The ex started framing himself as the one who endured, the survivor, the one who stayed too long because he cared too much. It's a narrative audiences recognize instantly because it's familiar and emotionally satisfying. It gives viewers a hero and a villain without requiring effort. And once that dynamic is set, it's almost impossible to undo. Then came the moment that changed everything. One line, one sentence delivered with such casual confidence that it sucked the oxygen out of the conversation. It wasn't even shouted. It wasn't dramatic. It was said plainly. And that's why it landed like a slap. Reaction videos exploded. That single clip got reposted, slowed down, captioned, and dramatized more times than anyone could count. People weren't even watching the full interview anymore. They were watching reactions to reactions. The narrative was officially out of control. What's important to understand is that this wasn't just gossip spilling out. This was a calculated release of information designed to provoke emotion first and explanation later. The ex knew exactly which details would stick. He knew what would trend. He knew how the internet works. And he used that knowledge with surgical precision. Meanwhile, Chrisean's past behavior worked against her, not because it proved anything, but because it made the accusations easier to believe for people who already had their minds made up. When someone has a loud history, silence gets interpreted as confirmation. Fair or not, that's how public perception operates. By the end of the interview, the damage was already done. Even people who wanted to stay neutral admitted the tone felt unnecessarily heavy. Like the goal wasn't healing, but exposure. Like the intention wasn't honesty, but impact. And impact is the currency of the internet. The saddest part is that none of this required proof to be effective. It required timing. And the timing was perfect. Chrisean was already a polarizing figure, already trending regularly, already surrounded by controversy. This interview didn't introduce chaos. It amplified it. As the last clips circulated, one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't going to blow over quickly. This wasn't a one-day outrage cycle. The seeds had been planted, and the internet was watering them aggressively. Whether the claims were exaggerated, selective, or completely false almost didn't matter anymore. The story had legs, and somewhere behind the screens, Chrisean was forced to watch her name get dragged through a version of events she didn't get to narrate yet. Because if there's one thing history has taught us, it's that silence is rarely the end of the story. It's usually just the pause before things get even louder. Once the interview escaped its original platform, it stopped being a conversation and turned into a spectacle. Context didn't just fade into the background. It got shoved into a ditch and left there. What remained was a highlight reel of chaos, chopped into bite-sized clips engineered for outrage. And the internet did what it always does when it smells drama with a pulse. It multiplied it. Memes were the first responders, not fact-checkers, not nuance. Memes, screenshots of paused faces, exaggerated captions, dramatic filters, and ominous music edits flooded timelines. What was said mattered less than how it could be repackaged. Every clip got darker with each repost, like a rumor passing through a game of digital telephone where accuracy dies and exaggeration thrives. Then came the reaction economy. Every creator with a ring light and an opinion rushed to weigh in. Some pretended to be neutral while clearly enjoying the chaos. Others picked sides immediately, declaring loyalty like this was a sports rivalry instead of real people's lives. Titles screamed betrayal, exposure, manipulation. Nobody whispered anymore. This was full-volume scandal. Celebrity reactions poured gasoline on the fire. Meanwhile, the ex leaned back and let the storm do its work. He didn't need to say anything else. The internet was finishing his sentences for him. Silence, in this case, wasn't humility. It was strategy. When chaos is trending, the smartest move is often to step aside and let it burn hotter on its own. Speculation escalated into conspiracy. People questioned motives, timing, and money. Was this interview about healing or headlines? Closure or clout? Old business deals, past arguments, and forgotten screenshots got dragged into the spotlight like evidence bags. Suddenly, this wasn't just personal drama, it was a masterclass in how to weaponize public curiosity. And then there was Chrisean's continued silence. Every hour without a response became its own headline. She's hiding, she's lawyered up, she's devastated, she's plotting. Everyone projected their preferred storyline onto her absence. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It was deafening. And the internet hates a vacuum. It will always fill it with noise. At some point, the conversation stopped being about what was said and started being about what it meant. Tone analysis replaced facts. People debated pauses, eye contact, vocal inflections like they were decoding a hostage video. The ex's calm demeanor got reframed as honesty by some and manipulation by others. Same behavior, opposite conclusions. That's how polarized narratives work. Brands and platforms quietly distance themselves. Not publicly, never publicly. But subtle shifts happened. Algorithms cooled. Invitations stalled. The ripple effect of controversy doesn't announce itself. It whispers behind closed doors. And for public figures, those whispers can cost more than any headline. As outrage peaked, fatigue followed close behind. Some viewers began questioning the spectacle itself. Why was this entertaining? Why were people enjoying the unraveling? A few voices called out the cruelty, pointing out that trauma packaged as content doesn't magically become harmless. Those voices were quieter, but they existed. And they mattered. Still, the damage kept spreading. Reaction videos reacted to reaction videos. People who hadn't even watched the interview formed strong opinions based on summaries of summaries. At that point, truth was irrelevant. Perception was everything. And perception had already chosen chaos. The internet moved fast, but not forward. It just circled the same emotional drain, pulling more people in each loop. Everyone waited for the next move, the response, the counter-narrative, the moment when the silence would finally break and flip the script. Because one thing was clear, this story wasn't finished. It had reached a boiling point, not a conclusion. And in scandals like this, the aftermath is often louder than the explosion itself. When the person at the center finally speaks, it doesn't calm the storm, it redirects it. By the end of this phase, reputations were bruised, alliances were questioned, and the line between truth and performance was completely blurred. The interview had done exactly what it was designed to do. It dominated the conversation, hijacked attention, and left nothing untouched. The only question left was how long the silence could hold. Because when it finally cracked, whoever came next wasn't going to be quiet. It was going to be calculated, emotional, and impossible to ignore. By the time the dust started to settle, it became painfully obvious that nothing was actually settled at all. The interview had already done its job, and the internet had moved from shock to judgment with alarming efficiency. This is the phase where scandals stop feeling loud and start feeling heavy. The phase where consequences quietly stack up while the noise slowly fades. Chrisean Rock didn't just wake up to trending hashtags. She woke up to a shifted landscape. The tone around her name had changed. Not drastically, not overnight, but subtly enough to be dangerous. Public perception doesn't flip like a switch. It tilts. And once it tilts, gravity does the rest. Some supporters stayed loyal louder than ever, defending her against what they called a calculated smear campaign. They pointed out the timing, the selective storytelling, the way pain had been monetized. But even among supporters, there was discomfort, a sense that something sacred had been dragged into the public square and stripped for clicks. Defending her didn't feel fun anymore. It felt necessary. On the other side, critics grew bolder. They didn't just question her behavior. They questioned her character. The interview gave them permission. That's how narratives work. Once a door opens, people rush through it carrying their own assumptions. Every past mistake got relabeled as evidence. Every loud moment became a red flag in hindsight. The ex, meanwhile, existed in an interesting position. To some, he was brave for speaking out. To others, he was opportunistic. His credibility became its own debate, not because anyone could definitively prove or disprove what he said, but because motives matter in the court of public opinion. And his motives were now under a microscope. Old interviews resurfaced. Contradictions were noted. Tone shifts were analyzed. People started asking why certain details were shared and others weren't. The same internet that amplified his words now began dissecting them. That's the cycle. The spotlight never stays flattering for long. At some point, the audience started asking a deeper question. Not about who was right or wrong, but about why they were watching so closely. Why pain had become entertainment. Why trauma sold better when it came with dramatic lighting and a thumbnail. That discomfort didn't go viral, but it lingered. The interview didn't just affect two people. It affected how people talked about boundaries, about privacy, about what exes each other once a relationship ends. It reopened debates about power, fame, and who gets believed when stories conflict. And those debates didn't come with easy answers. As time passed, the outrage cycle began to slow. New scandals emerged, as they always do. Attention shifted, but residue remained. Search results don't forget. Screenshots don't expire. This chapter became part of Chrisean's digital footprint, whether she consented to it or not. For Chrisean, the challenge ahead wasn't just responding. It was rebuilding trust in a landscape that thrives on doubt. That takes time. It takes consistency. And it takes surviving the urge to clap back when the internet demands a spectacle. The ex also faced an aftershock. Speaking out isn't a one-way street. Once you share, you lose control over how your story is used. Supporters can turn critical. Sympathy can expire. And the same audience that applauds exposure today might accuse exploitation tomorrow. The spotlight giveth, and it taketh aggressively. As weeks passed, one thing became clear. This wasn't a career-ending scandal. It wasn't a redemption arc either. It was something messier. A reminder that public lives come with public consequences, and private pain doesn't stay private once microphones are involved. The darkest part of this story isn't what was said. It's how quickly it became content. How easily empathy got traded for engagement. How normal it felt to consume someone else's heartbreak like a series we could binge and forget. And yet, curiosity lingered. Because silence rarely lasts forever. People waited for the moment when Chrisean would finally speak, when her version would hit the internet and shift the balance again. That moment, whenever it comes, won't erase what happened. But it will add another layer, because scandals don't end. They evolve. They shape reputations, rewrite narratives, and leave scars that aren't always visible. And in this case, the interview didn't just blindside Chrisean Rock, it exposed the machinery behind modern outrage. When the internet moves on, the people involved don't. They live with the aftermath long after the trending tabs refresh. And that's the part no viral clip ever shows. And this right here is where it gets real. Because stories like this don't just disappear, they mutate. They resurface. They come back louder, messier, and somehow even more unhinged than before. If you thought this interview was the end of the chaos, you haven't been paying attention. This is the internet. Closure is optional. Drama is guaranteed. So now I need you to do something. If this story made you pause, rewind, or say nah, that's crazy out loud. Smash that like button like it personally betrayed you. Don't tap it politely, hit it with intention. Algorithms love chaos almost as much as the internet does, and we're feeding both today. Drop your take in the comments. Not the safe one, not the polite one, the real one. Was this interview truth, tactics, or straight-up clout farming disguised as healing? Do you think silence is strategy, or is it pressure building before the next explosion? I want every unfiltered opinion down below, because the comment section is where the real debates happen. And if you're new here, don't just watch and vanish. Subscribe, because stories like this don't stop dropping. They stack, they overlap, they get darker, louder, and more unbelievable by the week. This channel doesn't chase headlines, we break down the madness behind them. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next twist, the next response, or the next moment when the internet flips the script all over again. Trust me, this story isn't done talking. Not even close. Remember, fame fades, receipts last forever, and silence is never just silence, it's foreshadowing. Welcome to the chaos. Welcome to the breakdown. Welcome to Celeb Insanity. Welcome to the breakdown. Welcome to Celeb Insanity.